We've heard some wonderful presentations this morning, Creel, Mark and Helen, and you've heard themes such as data, social, innovation, digital, and so forth. And what I want to do in this presentation is start to unite those themes and focus on talent, you in this room. Now, I'm going to apologise from the outset because this presentation might be slightly controversial, and I'm going to be true to form of our brand. I'm going to be reasonably blunt, and so I'm hoping you respect that and don't walk out of the room halfway through. I've been asked today to talk about how to elevate the marketing profession. Now, as most of you know, it's a topic that I'm more than a little passionate about. After all, I've spent the past 10 years, in our group in the past 10 years, building a business around a single thing, what we call creative leadership talent. Who's got it? Who needs it? And how do you develop it? How do you find it? How do you measure it? And how do you get the most out of it? And when I say creative leadership talent, I don't simply mean creative directors and advertising agencies, because if we based our business on that, I would have had a mental breakdown quite some years ago. By creative leadership talent, I mean marketing professionals, advertising professionals, media professionals, all of them creative thinkers and creative doers, and all of them in the business of using creative thinking to create value. And you're going to hear me mention that quite a lot today. So naturally, I've got some strong views about the potential of creative leadership talent and about the potential of marketing, media, and advertising professionals. So I was thrilled when Ines asked me to give this speech today. But as I started to prepare my remarks, I was struck by something. I've been asked the wrong question. Because before we can talk about how to elevate the marketing profession, we need to focus on why. Why do we need to do this? The world of business has known for years that people in marketing have a greater aptitude for insight, for ideas, for creative problem solving, and for innovation than their peers. Well, some of us do. And yet, if we look at the past 20 years, increasingly marketers are being overlooked for the top jobs. This is particularly the case in Australia and the UK and New Zealand. Traditionally, both in Australia and around the world, CEOs have risen through the ranks of finance and operations, not through marketing and not through creativity. We have to change that too, because tradition isn't going to cut it anymore. And today's earlier presentations, I think, have demonstrated that quite clearly. So what I want to do today is to begin by focusing on what's going on what's changed, and what's going to keep on changing. Why do we need more and more creative leaders to elevate their influence? Why do we need to change the business of business in Australia? And importantly, why will the ability to create value, not just manage it, be the key to all of our futures? And in other words, why must we elevate this marketing profession? And later I'm going to talk a little bit about what it will take, how you can do it. But first, how and why? Why us? Why now? And to answer that, we need to begin with a simple question. What's going on? What's driving the need for creative leadership? Let's look at today's typical CEO. Around 1 in 3 start out in finance. And by the time they make it to the top job, more than 1 in 2 have built a background in finance or banking. This is particularly the case here or the UK. That's more than half of the current CEOs whose formative experiences are in valuation, not value creation. Now, step one rung down the ladder and look at the changing role and background of the CFO. Over 60% of CFOs are internal appointments. The average tenure of a financial professional prior to becoming CFO of their company is almost 12 years. 12 years in one company. And the average tenure once in the CFO's chair is another 5 years. 17 plus years in one firm. So it's no wonder their influence is so amplified in today's debate. And that's a low estimate. That's based on European data. In the United States, the average CFO tenure has been estimated up to 12 years. 12 years just in the CFO chair alone. More tenure, more influence, and that's the bottom line for CFOs. Suzanne Wood is quite a well-known headhunter in the UK, and she specialises in the finance area, said, and I quote, "That doesn't mean CFOs necessarily make great CEOs. The CEO must tolerate ambiguity and intuitive decision-making. It's all about building teams, setting out a vision, demonstrating high energy and confidence. And then there are specific responsibilities in sales and marketing, for example. None of these things are core to the CFO, where a more structured approach to people management and less empathetic tendencies are actually an advantage." She's right, of course. So what about the people with a marketing background? This audience. What about more of our executive leaders starting a life as creative leaders? Well, by contrast, with a time-serving CFO, the CMO typically lasts just 3 to 4 years. And if you start to average it out over a longer period, the CMO tenure has tended to be even lower, around 2 to 3 years. And then there's a research that shows that even when a CMO does make it to the top job, it's almost always at a different company. You have to leave to get the top job. The examples of a CMO becoming the CEO of the same company are all too rare. And then we need to step up high and look at the boards. The percentage of CFOs between the ages of 40 and 49 who also serve on boards as non-executive directors has increased from 29% in 2002 to 42% in 2012. That's a big shift. And it reflects a growing demand for financial expertise on boards. And more than that, there is a really clear pattern happening here. Time and again, steady conservatism and time serving are being favoured over risk and innovation, two of the themes that we've heard repeatedly this morning. Management and finance are being favoured over leadership and creativity. Now, of course, finance matters. That goes without saying. But how has creativity been allowed to become a dirty word? How has marketing, the engine of innovation and value creation, allowed itself to be relegated to second-class status? We, the marketing tribe, what we call the creative tribe, may have to accept some of the blame. Perhaps at times we've allowed our creativity to outweigh our commercial sensitivity. And perhaps we will have to rebalance our efforts in the future. And perhaps we've been too quick to distinguish creative thinking from commercial thinking. Ideas and stories from data and dollars. And perhaps we'll have to adapt our skills and behaviours in order to elevate our profession in the future. And really, forget perhaps, we are going to have to adapt. I'm going to come back to that point, because there's a far bigger issue to talk about here first. And it's this. Even if we have to accept some of the responsibility, we also need to understand there are bigger forces at play. We need to understand the wider cultural context and that we operate in, and the political context we are operating in. We need to broaden our perspective. We need to start by understanding how global governments have been thinking about finance and economics over the past few years. We need to understand the austerity mindset. In 2010, 2 Harvard academics published an explosive report. The report by Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff showed conclusively that government debt exceeding 90% of gross domestic product was damaging to economic growth, conclusively. This report immediately provided nourishment to every politician around the world and much media, wanting to reverse fiscal policies designed to stimulate economies that were still recovering from the global financial crisis and replace this stimulus with austerity. And we know this debate, from the United States to the United Kingdom and even to Australia, via the crisis-ridden economies of Ireland, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Cyprus and Greece. This research has been at the heart of every argument for austerity. And any balanced discussion about the equal merits of investment in infrastructure, ideas and innovation to drive growth have been shut down. And then 2 months ago, something remarkable happened. Thomas Hourigan, a doctoral student at the University of Massachusetts, started finding mistakes in the research behind this report. The most basic of these mistakes was that Reinhardt and Rogoff had failed to include 5 of the 20 countries they'd studied in their Excel calculations. Indeed, countries from A to D, Australia, Canada amongst them, rendering all their numbers meaningless, and indeed the entire premise of their argument false. And you can see that change now starting to occur in the European Union. They realise they've made a massive mistake, and most of their economies have gone back into recession. Mind you, this hasn't stopped the march of austerity in many corners. And there's a bigger point here, which is the austerity groupthink that's gripped the world and skewed our decision-making. And it's not just in politics, it's in business. Because what the austerity mindset says to people is incredibly seductive. You don't have to take risk in order to grow. You don't have to innovate in order to grow. You don't have to create in order to grow. No, no, no. You simply have to cut in order to grow. This is a pattern that's been reflected in our daily business realities. The rise of procurement, strategic procurement even. And really, if we're honest about it, 20 years of continual cost cutting. There is a clear pattern of business undervaluing marketing and creative thinking, austerity thinking, the marginalising of creativity, the rejection of risk, short-term expediency over long-term leadership. And again, this perverse belief that you simply have to cut in order to grow. An Ernst & Young report in 2010, 2 years after the GFC, found that 61% of the CFOs believe the standing of finance had improved over the preceding 3 years. And in the same survey, 65% of them identified cost management as their number one priority compared to 3 years earlier. That's right. At the same time, as the Obama stimulus package was rescuing the American car industry, and it was, the American manufacturing, American banks, and the American economy from potentially a decade of potential depression, and it has done that, CFOs were already confidently introducing the austerity mindset into boardrooms around the world. So no wonder the CFOs think they are still winning the argument today. But while this thought leadership has been destroying many of our traditional businesses, a different type of leader has been inventing and growing new ones, the entrepreneur creel. The entrepreneur thinks differently, and while, of course, the entrepreneur is not a new one, the world needs entrepreneurial ideas today, more than ever. From the outset, the entrepreneur is driven by an idea, by an insight, and by a commitment to disruption and risk. Branson the Jobs, and here in this country, Dick Smith to Aussie John, you can see how this founder spirit never leaves the entrepreneur. And it's not just the spirit, it's the impact on the bottom line too. Because founder-led companies do better. They do better because they are committed to innovation, to disruption, to customers, to listening, to learning, to improving, to investing, to taking risk. So many of the marketing fundamentals. They do better because they fight for change, not against it. And they do better because they combine creativity and commercial reality in every decision they make. Founder-led companies are built on where to play, how to win strategies. And they usually command a founder premium when they float on the markets. You look at Yahoo recently buying Tumblr for $1 billion. So where does that leave us? In a world where a few can-do entrepreneurial leaders are the exception to the rule of a majority of austerity managers who won't even try, or in a world where most of our businesses are run by people who could never start a business themselves, no chance. Because the world is changing and the new realities will be totally unforgiving for those unwilling to embrace creative leadership. At Hourigan International, we spent the last year talking to leaders across 14 different categories of business, and we've identified 10 connected forces we believe are going to change the game for business, driving the need for what we call creative leadership talent. We call them the drivers of change, and you can see them everywhere you look. A digital revolution is transforming every corner of our world, connecting people, powering productivity, enabling lives, and creating data. Because hand in hand with the digital revolution is the data explosion, which means we know more, but we can be also overwhelmed more, as to Mark's point earlier this morning. This combination of digital revolution and data explosion is giving way to new realities for business, empower consumers, connected communities, new business models, and disruptive ideas. The only way to win this new world is innovation. And we know this line, you innovate or you die. And today's successful leaders are the ones that see an explosion of creative possibility and make a commitment to drive the data. But it's hard because you can't just innovate based on the new possibilities of digital, armed with the security of data. You also need to embrace a new sense of value. Because today's hyper-connected, socially aware consumer expects more from brands, which means you need to create shared value, not just shareholder value. And value takes many forms. Increasingly in a world of commoditized products and services, the experience is often the only way to differentiate your brand and your offerings. Meanwhile, so much noise and clutter to break through, even brands have mastered the opportunities of digital and data, developing innovative new products and services that create shared value and are delivered through a world-class experience, can still stumble over the challenge of engagement. One of the biggest barriers is an old world attitude to risk. It just doesn't cut it in a world that is now more and more controlled by the empowered consumer. With social media and social connectivity flipping the balance of power and enabling your competitors to go from startup to major threat at lightning speed, which we've seen in our category, taking creative risk is now the safest and perhaps only option for business leaders in every sector at every level of their organisation. These are the drivers of creative leadership. And just look at some examples. The evolution of the entertainment media landscape, it's a category that we know very well in our business. Netflix used to mail its members DVDs. Now it's making multi-million-dollar TV shows. Kevin Spacey's House of Cards. And now they're saying the goal is to become HBO faster than HBO can become us. Well, look at Rovio. One minute they were selling 99-cent downloads of Angry Birds. Now they're making a movie in a theme park. It's like another Disney just came out of the mobile app world. Or close to home to Telstra, one of our big partners. Once a state-owned, bureaucratic telecommunications company. Now they're hiring a dozen journalists to cover the NRL. 3 companies, DVD mail order business, an app developer, a former state-owned telco, all converging on the business of content creation. Change, disruption, it's everywhere you look, and at a speed which we've never seen before. The business of business has been turned upside down by technology. Business can no longer afford to operate the way they did last year, and no business is immune from this. It's a case of be prepared or perish, which is why the smartest companies are looking for transformational change. And importantly, for the leaders who will drive that change. But we aren't the only people detecting change in the air. We've entered an era of unprecedented change, unprecedented risk, and unprecedented speed. And there are two competing leadership narratives at play. Two. One that says you need to manage change, manage for today, and reduce risk, remembering the austerity mindset. The other says you have to drive change, lead for tomorrow, and embrace risk. Our challenge for all of us in this room, in the marketing profession, in this creative tribe, is to make the case for driving change. And then having made the case, we need to be ready to step up and be the drivers of that change. This is our obligation, and we have to be brutally honest with ourselves about what it will take. Because, let's be blunt, we as a tribe have not fought hard enough to defend and grow the influence of our marketing profession. This industry, this tribe, has not stepped up and fought for our importance and our influence, our deserved influence on the business table. To use a Netflix analogy, we've let the finance guys learn how to be us quicker than we have learned to be them. We need to change that. And we need to build the hard science of commerce onto the art of creativity. And we need to be ready to be creative leaders. To understand what it will take, we need to look deeper. We need to look at what has driven the success of great creative leaders. The leaders who have founded truly innovative businesses, transforming their sectors and destroying tradition in the process. This is a topic that we at Hourigan International have been passionate about for the past decade. And it's something we've invested considerable time and research into, in particular over the past 12 months, trying to define the exact leadership traits we believe will enable leaders to master the drivers of change that will define this new era of business that we're in. We've identified the behavioral makeup of the creative leader. And we have found it's a fine balance between two distinct archetypes. For lack of better terms, the artist and the general. All the core traditional traits of leadership, but in balance with a whole range of more creative and imaginative traits. This means intelligence and intuition, commerce and creativity, control and collaboration, stability and change. So in facing the challenges of speed, data, and risk, we all have to be generals, focused, courageous, decisive. And in facing the challenges of innovation, engagement, and changing consumer values, you'll have to be artist, imaginative, and visionary storytellers. And the true creative leaders will combine both these mindsets to create a third set of critical traits. So creative leadership is about vision, with an eye on the future and the present, a passion for ideas, and a commitment to action. Another thing that marks our creative leadership is holistic thinking, balancing rational thought with emotional intelligence. One of the characteristics of creative leadership is how intuitive it appears, making bold leaps without seeing all the data. This intuition is critical to creative leadership's inventive ability to develop new solutions, methods, models, and ideas. Creative leadership brings imagination and courage to the process of invention, and is quick to turn invention into action, often making mistakes. So it's critical that creative leadership is agile, constantly challenging and improving its own ideas. This agility is supported by the great judgment we've observed in creative leadership, an ability to combine its comfort with data and market intelligence, with its strong instincts. And of course, even bad ideas have a chance of success under creative leadership, as typically possesses the gift of inspiration, compelling people to come on the journey through the power of both personal convictions and storytelling. In fact, collaborating with people, including and empowering them, is another trademark of creative leadership. Essential to that commitment to people is a belief in seeing every decision through the eyes of all of their communities. These balanced traits of creative leadership are required to handle the drivers of change that are transforming business. understanding, embracing, and developing this balance will be the key to our profession. The key to putting our collaborative profession, our tribe, where it belongs. Leading business, leading Australia into the future. And we can look at some of the examples, the great examples, from Bezos to Branson, from Jobs to Jay-Z, Coco Chanel to Tom Ford, and on these shores, Dick Smith, Aussie John, Thody, Borghetti, there are many out there. Time and again, we see the same things, creativity and balance with commercial reality, getting that harmony in play. I was asked today to talk about how to elevate the marketing profession. And I started by broadening the question to one of leadership, in particular to creative leadership. I talked about how I see the marketing tribe as an untapped and much needed source of creative leadership in our business landscape and from our perspective, indeed, in our country. I talked about the austerity mindset and the grip that it has on our culture. And I talked about the 10 drivers of change that require us to reject austerity and valuation and replace it with a full-blown commitment to creative leadership and value creation. Why? Because creative leadership understands these new realities that we are living in. And more than that, creative leadership inspires new realities. I hope that in sharing the work Hourigan International is doing on the traits of the creative leader, I've gone to some way to answering how each of you can become a creative leader. Because there's no easy answer, and we're all going to have to work hard. As individuals, we each have to address our creative leadership deficits. We have to be both artist and the general, and something more. We have to be honest with ourselves about whether we are striking the optimal balance of creative and commercial thinking. And as a group, we have to work hard to elevate each other, to promote the work and impact of our tribe, to make the case for creative leadership, and to deliver real change and impact, showing why we deserve a seat at the top table of leadership. So I hope I've addressed the question I was asked, but I hope I've also shown there's only part of a bigger issue, which is understanding why we need this profession to be elevated. Because the world has changed. And I think we are best equipped to deal with it. But we face a battle against a motivated opponent, seeking to harness the same change. And we must win for the sakes of the future, for business, for the economy, for Australia, and indeed for us, for you. So how do we win? By being both the artist in general and something more, by being creative leaders, and by understanding the work, the honesty, and the ambition that will be required. Thank you very much.